The digital dossier is a collection of all sorts of data about people that is then used and analyzed to make decisions about people, whether or not they get a loan, or whether or not they get a job, or a variety of other very important life decisions.
I'm Misha Da Vinci. This is the Grift Podcast, conversations to get you ready for a very different future. Privacy is fundamental to our humanity. Without it, we would not even begin to know who we are. But over the last 2 decades, the internet has gradually stripped away this core human right, and we have been, for the most part, oblivious. In this episode, I'm joined by one of the preeminent digital privacy experts in the world. Daniel J. Solove is the Eugene L. and Barbara A. Bernard Professor of Intellectual Property and Technology Law at George Washington University Law School. He is the founder of Teach Privacy, a company that provides privacy and data security training programs to businesses, schools, healthcare institutions, and other organizations. He's been interviewed and quoted by the media in several hundred articles and broadcasts, including the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Chicago Tribune, the Associated Press, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, NPR, and others. He's written numerous books, including Breached: Why Data Security Law Fails and How to Improve It in 2022, Nothing to Hide: The False Trade-Off Between Privacy and Security, 2011, Understanding Privacy in 2008, The Future of Reputation, Gossip, Rumor, and Privacy on the Internet in 2007, and The Digital Person: Technology and Privacy in the Information Age in 2004. He's also written several privacy textbooks and a children's fiction book about privacy called The Eyemonger. A graduate of Yale Law School, Professor Solove has testified before Congress, he's contributed to amicus briefs before the US Supreme Court, and he has served as a consultant or expert witness in a number of high-profile privacy cases. He teaches information privacy law, consumer privacy law regulatory approaches, criminal procedure, criminal law and literature.
Daniel Solove, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really, really happy that you could do this.
Well, thanks for having me.
You are one of the preeminent experts on privacy and data security law, like maybe the number one in the world. How did you get into this field? Like, why privacy? Why do you even care?
It started when I was in law school in the late 90s. I knew I wanted to teach law, and I really loved both technology and humanities. I took an early class, the first time it was taught in my law school, on internet law. The internet was pretty new then. The commercial internet, as we know it now, was just getting started. And I thought this was fascinating. I thought the issues were really interesting. And I thought that bringing a humanities perspective to that would be really fruitful. So I started, and I thought I would be a cyber law scholar, broadly speaking, about all sorts of things with the internet. And I didn't know that privacy law was a field. It really wasn't much of a field. It was a topic. And I thought, okay, I'd start with privacy. It was very interesting. And I thought I'd write maybe 1 or 2 articles on it, and that would be that. And then I'd move on to other issues in cyber law. But privacy proved to be a lot deeper of a rabbit hole than I thought. It really led to a pretty wide, almost infinite expanse of land to explore. And so I never really have run out of issues to think about and write about in this area.
I know, and you've written it so extensive. I mean, you are prolific in every single way. When I was prepping to talk with you, it was such a delight because there's so much to study, so much to read and learn, so many books, so many articles, so much real scholarly work. And then more like fun stuff, like you wrote a book for kids, The Eyemonger, right?
Yeah, and that was inspired by my son. We would tell stories at night and read a lot of stories, and so I was steeped in all this children's literature, and noticed that there really was nothing that talked about privacy. I couldn't find any book. There was no story, both nonfiction and fiction, that really had much to do with privacy. And so that inspired the book. And my son's usually a character in stories that I tell. So that's was sort of part of the fun of it, was being able to tell a story and weave him in as a character, and also hopefully produce a book that could bring some awareness about the concept of privacy to children.
You know that privacy is deeply important, and to the point where you want to share it with kids. You want to make them aware, expand their understanding, teach them about this very important thing. What is it that we don't know? What is, first of all, what is privacy? Let's take it down to the very core basics. What is privacy? And then what is it that we don't seem to understand, that we're missing, why you had to write a kid story about it?
Well, privacy is very complicated because it's, as I see it, it's a broad umbrella term that actually captures a lot of different related things, but they're distinct and they're different. They have similarities, and privacy is everything from protection against surveillance to protection against prying or excessive questioning about one's life, to the protection of the use of one's name or image in ways that people don't want, or protection against disclosure of information about people. It's protection against having information overly accessible, or protection against breach of confidentiality. All of these things are different things, actually. And I think there are a lot of misconceptions about privacy, and a lot of what I see in policy uh, involves a failure to understand that privacy really consists of these different things. I'll give you one example. A lot of times the law does not adequately protect information that is exposed to other people or exposed to the public in any way. The law typically takes what I call the secrecy paradigm, which is if something's entirely secret, then we can protect it as privacy. But if it's not entirely secret, if you've shared it with someone, if you've posted it online, then it's available somewhere in a public record. It's no longer private. And I take issue with that. I think that's a very crabbed and narrow understanding of privacy. Privacy really involves the ability to protect information and its accessibility and its confidentiality. So you might say something to your doctor. It doesn't mean that you lose privacy in it. You expect that information stays confidential. You
So,
expect information to stay confidential when you share it with certain friends or family, or even when you share it on Facebook and you limit it to your friends only. You expect it to stay in your friends. If they suddenly said, okay, we're going to take everything you posted and just make it public, I don't think the argument that, oh, well, you shared it with a bunch of people, therefore, it's okay to share it with the world, is okay.
okay, so we can understand privacy in relation to private versus public. So private meaning this is for my eyes only, or for the eyes of those I choose to share it with, versus anybody can know what this is. Would that be sort of correct? Just
Yeah.
from a layman's perspective?
Well, I think that what it really involves is maintaining boundaries and
Mm-hmm.
appropriate use of information. So it's about, not just about, is it public or private? That's just one line that we have. But what
Mm-hmm.
makes it complicated is about use.
In iMonger, you talk about that, creating that, having that space without someone, where someone's not looking at you, having that space to sort of think, to breathe, to create, to be, that private space, versus it being a space where someone was looking in and looking at you, and how that looking in sort of really changed the experience for the human being. So privacy is some sort of fundamental human right, some sort of thing that people need to have in order to be human.
Yeah, I mean, the book, The Eye Monger, is really about the value of privacy, why it's important that we have space to ourselves, that we can decide when we want to share information and who we want to share it with. And that's really what the book is trying to capture. And that's something that is very much endangered today
Yeah.
because of the way that we use technology, and also the way that the failure of the law to protect us in a lot of the uses of technology.
Right. Okay. So there's privacy before the internet, and there's privacy after the internet. Can you sort of share, like, in simple terms, like what's the big difference for our listeners?
Well, I mean, privacy was every time there's a new technology, people proclaim privacy's dead. I even created a cartoon about all the different stages and inventions and of technology and how in each one privacy's threatened, and there are
Like
always
photography,
threats to privacy.
like cameras would have, like, people would have been like, oh my god, like, that's a
Exactly, it
mm,
sparked the very a very famous article by Samuel Warren and Louis Brandeis called "The Right to Privacy," and this is 1890. Um, the internet, certainly is a revolution in the spread of information, and I think that for really the first time in human history, the average person can now share information around the world. They have the power that a major broadcast media studio would have. And that's pretty profound that people can share information so widely to a potentially worldwide audience, and that now by putting all that power in people's hands, and then with websites encouraging people to share a lot of information, you start to have some problems, and some of these problems are we see them today. People oversharing and regretting that they shared information. We have problems with people being harassed and bullied online, with mob like behavior, disinformation, all sorts of things, because we've created this world, and it's good and bad. I mean, there are great things about the internet. I love the internet. I think there's wonderful things it's brought us,
mhm.
but it also has a dark side.
So we are because of the internet, because of this massive technological revolution, our exposure levels have massively changed, but we're still behaving as if nothing is different. We're walking about putting all of our data out there. It's exposed to the whole world, and we're just acting as if everything is just as it was. But it's not.
Well, I think the technology
Mhm.
is designed to make it uh,
Seem as if.
feel like we're not doing that, and that's one
Mm,
thing that technology does in the design. um, uh, Technology could make us more aware of the implications of sharing and make it appear more, visually, and give us the sense, like, of the import of what we're doing. But instead, it looks like, hey, I'm just putting it on my talking to my computer. I'm just writing thoughts on, and we don't feel it. And one thing that technology we see with a lot of modern technology is that how it's designed affects how people behave.
mm,
I think it's a good thing that a lot of times when you start recording, there's a little noise made, or there's some indication on the computer, or the camera lights up. That's a design choice to indicate to people that you're being recorded, because it doesn't have to do that, and then you wouldn't know that you're being recorded. I think there are a lot of times where devices record people and people get a kind of false sense of security or comfort with it. So a home assistant device is recording, but people don't feel like they're being listened to all the time, but they are. So
So they're
you know,
designed. So it's designed. It's designed to seduce us into thinking that this is safe, this is good behavior, you should do this. When on the back end, it's not at all. It's a very specific choice for a very specific reason, and there's a whole business model, extractive business model behind that.
Exactly. And all these technologies do so much work in the background that we don't see. You know, how the ordering of our posts on social media, and the what we see, it just looks like, oh, it's just naturally occurring, but no, it's actually ordered and structured by algorithms. Uh, Everything we do is influenced and shaped by technology, and it's shaping even trying to encourage people to be more extreme online because of the way it's designed.
And
I think people think this is naturally occurring, but it's not. It's definitely very very structured and controlled on the other side.
and there's a very specific business intention. There's a strategy, marketing plan, business plan, profit motive. It's not innocent at all, even on a design side. So, oh, well, let's just keep people online because it'll be fun. No, that's not the reason. Let's make money. Let's get people to do stuff so we can make money. In 2004, Daniel, you wrote this incredibly prescient book called The Digital Person, Technology and Privacy in the Information Age. And one of the most striking concepts that you introduce is the whole concept of the digital dossier. So this is 20 years later. Tell us about digital dossiers.
Sure. Yeah, I was almost thinking of coming up with a new edition of the book
Yes,
with a new
no,
preface.
that'll be amazing. This we need it.
Yeah,
We
and the
need it.
preface would just say, "I told you so,"
Exactly.
and that would be it.
I
But
love it. No, I was like, when I came across the book, I'm like, yes, 2004. He knew it was coming. He said it. He wrote the book. Here we are 20 years later, and people are like, huh? Oh my God, they have all that information on me? Anyway, so tell us. Tell us about your thinking then and then how it's progressed over the last 2 decades.
well, all the technology was largely there. I mean, even what we talk AI technology. Oh my gosh, it's so new. Well, it's not new. It's been developed for more than half a century.
Exactly.
It's just that now it works better and it's more sophisticated. But the concepts were there, and the practices. A lot of the practices we see today are basically yesterday's practices just advanced. The writing was on the wall even at the turn of the century. We had massive data gathering already. Some companies were already doing that, and collecting and selling people's information.
So,
We had credit reporting, which is a massive amount of information that was used to determine people's credit worthiness for loans, um, or do background checks for employment. But the internet, and what sparked me to write the book, was that really was going to take that and accelerate these trends. And so the digital dossier is a collection of all sorts of data about people that is then used and analyzed to make decisions about people. It could be just a simple decision like should I what ad should I see, or it could be a more complicated and influential decision on someone's life. It could be whether or not they get a loan, or whether or not they get a job, or a variety of other very important life decisions that this information could be used for. And these digital dossiers are this collection of data. I called the book "The Digital Person" because, in essence, we are reconstituted as a digital person of data, and this person is both fact and fiction. In fact, a lot of the data does say a lot about me, but it's also fiction. I'm not just a collection of bits and bytes and data. You can't capture a whole person just by the data. So we have this kind of weird fusion of decisions that are both invasive and getting too much into aspects of people's lives that they don't really want to share, in combination with certain shortcomings and failing to know the whole story and failing to understand the context, or getting things wrong
Okay.
as
So
well.
give us, what are the logistics of this dossier? Like how is it? How does this work on the back end? I am on my computer, I go to different sites, I'm shopping, I'm putting in my information because I have to register for this company or this institution or this governmental agency. Blibbity blibbity blibbity. Yay, I did that. It's so quick. Oh my gosh. Oh, it's just gonna come to me. Boom, I have an email. Everything's done. So I'm having this like maybe really cool experience, like because it's so easy, but give us the logistics of what's really happening on the back end.
Well, on the back end, what you do is being tracked. Data is being collected with every click, with everything that you do. This can be data can be gathered, and gathering a piece of data, in one instance, it's pretty can be often innocuous. Okay, so I bought Diet Coke, or I bought this particular book, or I visited this particular website. Occasionally some of those could be invasive, but a lot of times a lot of the information seems relatively innocuous, just your day to day information. But if you aggregate it, uh, what I call the aggregation effect, aggregating it together starts to paint a portrait of someone, that a lot of data about people, even just really mundane data about their lives, this can then be gathered, compiled, aggregated, and then analyzed, and computers can make inferences about the data. And these inferences can reveal certain things about people that they don't want to reveal. It's startling, the inferences that can be made. And so there's a very famous case where Target wanted to market to people who were pregnant, and they wanted to do it early on in the pregnancy before they started buying baby products. And so they gathered data about their shopping habits, and were able to figure out who was pregnant, and then start sending baby product ads to them. And what they found out through their algorithm analyzed, crunched all the data, and what it came out with was that people who bought cotton balls and unscented products had a very high correlation to those who later started buying baby products. And it was actually a pretty good prediction that it was able to make. So it's really every little thing, like small things that we don't think are going to reveal something about ourselves, could very well reveal that in this situation. And this is what's happening on the back end. People don't realize, okay, when you do something as simple as buy cotton balls, or buy certain products, that suddenly companies are going to figure out things about your health, that is that can be very startling to people, and upsetting to people who didn't want to share that information with the company.
Okay, so since the pandemic, more and more people have been shopping online. What are your insights on what's going on with with companies tracking or having a whole dossier on our shopping behaviors, what we're buying, and what we're doing in our lives? Because what we buy reflects a lot about what's going on in our lives. What are your insights on that?
Well, I think it's just happening more and more. I mean, I've been shopping online, for more than 20 years. I really love shopping online. I do most of my shopping online now. And the amount of information that companies have about me is vast, and sometimes it can be used for good purposes. So I do like the fact that on Amazon.com I can go back and I can search for, like, what books did I buy back in 1997, and I can find it. And I think that's interesting. And I don't mind if they recommend a book to me here or there or whatever. I think it becomes very troublesome when companies make inferences that people don't want or don't welcome, or when information is shared with other companies, or when it's used for other purposes that the consequences aren't known. So now companies want to get into AI. And they have all this data about what people are doing, and oh, let's use it for our AI. Well, I'm not so sure I want it for that use. I might be okay with, okay, all you're going to do is just recommend a book to me. I'm okay with that, but it doesn't mean that I want the information used for all these other purposes.
And of course, then there's that whole question of data breaches, right? So even if the company is not doing anything nefarious with our data, because of client server architecture, our the data breaches are like the norm. Like this is like every day.
Exactly, and it's very hard to keep data secure. The internet is just a notoriously insecure architecture, but we used it anyway, and built on it. It's just got a very insecure foundation, and security generally is really hard, and companies really struggle with keeping data secure, and even the biggest companies out there, uh, they've all had breaches, despite the fact that they have they spend millions and millions of dollars on security and still have breaches. Nothing is really safe. And it's scary because your information at the hospital, information your doctor has about your health, information about your financial information, information anywhere. Nothing is safe.
The internet, as it stands, is fundamentally flawed. Would you agree?
Um,
The way it's structured. I mean, we don't have privacy, and we don't have the data. We have no data security, so it's structurally, architecturally problematic.
Well, I'd say it's definitely problematic. I'm not saying sure it's flawed, because I would say flawed would be what purpose was it built for? And I think that the internet was built for really primarily an academic purpose. Is used first just to share academic information. No one thought like, okay, this is going to become a platform that you use to do your banking. So yeah, if you use a tool for something that it's not designed for, um, there are problems with that. If I try to use a screwdriver to hammer in a nail, it's not going to work as well as it should.
Interesting.
And so yeah, the internet is designed. It's not well designed for how we want to use it today, which is basically for everything. Uh, and in some ways, it works well, but the problem is that it has some big security problems. And one of the tricky things, though, is that a more secure internet could also come with costs in terms of control and government power that we might not desire. So there's trade offs. It's tricky, but right now we have a problem because the internet is very insecure, and the law is, I think, not handling data security very well. So that also makes the problem a lot worse. It's not just the internet, but our laws are not up to the task of protecting us either.
Yeah. So, who is who are the people, who are the forces, the companies, the institutions, organizations that are invading our privacy? So we have a structural problem on the internet, but then what are the entities that are taking advantage of this?
Well, everything is right. People invade each other's privacy online. We see constant cases of harassment and doxing and bullying and gossip and all sorts of problems. So it's ourselves. Companies are doing it. They are gathering and using all this information for all these different purposes. We have government our own government that's using it to engage in surveillance of people. We have other governments engaging in this as well. So pretty much everybody is invading privacy.
And why don't, and, we talked earlier about sort of the design way that the technology is designed that sort of lulls us into thinking this is a very safe behavior, let's do this, but it's not. But people don't care. I mean, even when we talk about this, somebody, if I say to, and you bring it up in a lot of your work, I have nothing to hide, so why do I care? So what if they know what I'm doing? So what if the government's watching me online? So what if Amazon has all my shopping history? I mean, I'm not doing anything wrong. So what? So, but this is not good behavior. We shouldn't think like this. Tell us why.
Yeah, I've written a lot about this, an article and actually a whole book on
Yes.
this. I think that this argument that, oh well, if I don't think anything is that invasive initially, then I've got nothing to hide. I think one, it really needs a better understanding of inference, that the information might seem innocuous in each instance, but aggregated over time, this can start to paint a picture about people. So part of it is just not really realizing the extensiveness of data collection over time and the sophistication that these algorithms can make inferences about people. People would be stunned about how much inference, how many facts can be inferred from this. Also, it's about use. It could be that, okay, the data collected about me, I don't want to hide, but there's still uses of that information that I might not want. So, someone, says, hey, I've got nothing to hide. Then, and then some company takes their image and puts it up on a billboard or puts it up on a big sign in Times Square and says, this person, always go out with my hemorrhoid cream or some kind of embarrassing product. They would say, whoa, I don't like that. That's embarrassing to me. I never endorsed this. This isn't about me. Well, you've got nothing to hide. But the problem is that that's a view of privacy, that privacy is only about hiding things, but privacy is about a lot more. It's about being able to have some control over one's name or likeness and how that is used. It's being able to control the boundaries of information flow. Someone might have an illness. Someone might have cancer, and they might not be embarrassed about cancer. They might be okay with sharing it, but they might not want it shared with everyone. They might want to decide when they want to share it and with whom. Same thing with a pregnancy. Some people would say it's not like they're not embarrassed about pregnancy, but they want to decide when they share it with their friends and family. Uh, Information's about use. It might not be embarrassing, but information's used, and then based on certain facts, you're denied a loan. And you say, well, you're denied a loan because you bought this, this, and this, or you did this, this, and that. Someone, well, I don't like that. That has nothing to do with hiding things. It's everything to do with having, appropriate control over the kinds of decisions and uses with your data. And so privacy is much more than what that argument gives it credit for. The argument has, I think, an overly narrow and restrictive definition of privacy that I think is a wrong definition of privacy. And I think if you think about privacy as more broadly uh, constituting protection against certain types of problematic uses of data, then nothing to hide argument really has nothing to say.
The privacy is sort of foundational to freedom and to all of the things that we sort of revere in the West, right? Democracy, freedom, the ability to sort of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, privacy is foundational to all of these things. Without privacy, we don't have any of these things, I would think.
Yeah, I think it's very important for many reasons. There's privacy Uh, just as protection of the self, there's privacy for protection against government surveillance. The one of the main tools that oppressive authoritarian governments use is invading privacy of people and using their data in troubling ways to monitor everything they do, to control them, to use searches and surveillance as pretexts to arrest people they don't like, or in terrible cases to use technology to identify people who are disfavored and round them up and in history and kill them. So privacy is very essential to freedom and democracy and to safety.
In that book where you talk about nothing to hide, the false trade-off between privacy and security, talk about that, because some people think that not only is it I have nothing to hide, but if this is what's necessary for security, then I should allow it.
Yeah. So this was sparked by the discussion after the September 11th attacks in 2001, and there was a lot of arguments and discussion that I saw in the media where you'd hear the following said: "We must give up, we must sacrifice our privacy and our civil liberties in order to be safe. That we just have to kind of make this sacrifice." And I take issue with that because that creates this kind of idea of a zero sum game that good privacy and good physical security can't coexist together, and that like by throwing privacy off the boat, it's going to stop the boat from sinking. That privacy, if you sacrifice privacy, that makes security good. In fact, I actually think that most of the best security measures don't involve invasions of privacy. It's actually rather poor security measures that involve invasions of privacy. And what we often hear from those who are creating these security measures is what they don't want is they don't want accountability. They don't want people to question what they're doing. They just want to be able to create something and create almost what is like security theater, make it look like they're doing real security when in actuality they're not. They really are they're not thoughtful, the most effective measures. They're poor measures, second best solutions, ones that are invading privacy that make people feel like they might be more secure, but they're actually not that good. And then they want to cloak what they do in without question. They want everyone just to defer to whatever they say and get a free pass, just do whatever they want. Well, I think that's actually not good because a lot of privacy protection, it's not stopping security measures. I mean, under the Fourth Amendment, for example, the government can come in and search your house. They could do incredibly invasive searches. So it's not the problem isn't that they can't do something for security. The Fourth Amendment says yes, you can search people's houses, but you must do it with accountability and oversight. So you have to first go to a court. A neutral party has to look and see if is the search justified, and then they get a warrant to be able to search. That's how the law protects. It doesn't stop searches. It just says you need to have oversight, and someone's going to make sure that you are really do need to search it. You have a real basis to search it. And so, a lot of times, what we see in arguments that were made by security officials after September 11th, and generally even still to this day, is they want to circumvent those processes. They want the measures without any oversight, without any accountability. They don't want to go to court and justify anything. And I think that's a problem. And I think that what privacy does, the privacy measures do, is that they create and force that kind of accountability on those those measures and those officials. And it makes sure that if we are going to give up privacy, that we do so when we get a greater security benefit. If we are balancing privacy and security, I want to make sure that if I'm giving up something valuable, I'm going to get more in return. And what we're often doing is giving up privacy and we're getting not much in return at all. And so there are ways to have both security and privacy if we have the appropriate policies and we don't just defer to the security side. And that's what the nothing to hide argument plays into. It plays into this argument, well, just let them do whatever the heck they want to do, and don't hold them to account on it. I think that that's actually how we get lazy, ineffective security measures rather than really good, thoughtful security measures that are critiqued, that people are constantly thinking, is this really working? Is this really giving us security? And how do we do it in the least invasive way that we can do it?
You know, one would think or surmise that if our government is collecting a lot of data on its private citizens, doing very invasive things, that because of the internet, the architecture of data and how it's handled and managed, a foreign government, a really opposing government, could hack into whatever system our government has that's where they're gathering, tracking all this data, and then infiltrate that and have access to all of our, like really, all of our lives. So there are massive, massive issues here. The moment you start interfering with people's privacy, you open up the door to all sorts of other potential harms. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was the big breach of OPM, and this breach involved a foreign government that hacked in and got background check information and fingerprints and all sorts of other data about all sorts of people, like and their families who had worked for the government, including security clearance information. So this is a massive breach. It actually was very bad for national security. The people's information, information about spies and others is compromised. People's biometric information, their fingerprints are compromised. And this breach happened because of privacy and security failures. These problems, security was very poor. That was noted. It was known. It just wasn't addressed. There wasn't enough concern or care to take the right steps. Also, there's a privacy problem, and that is data was kept just indefinitely. And so they kept data for years and years and years, and data about people's families that really shouldn't have been kept for that long. And then there was a sort of inadequate uh, segmentation of the data, so that once they got the data, get everything too easily. So many problems there. And there's just generally with a lot of organizations just a kind of rather cavalier attitude toward let's just gather as much data as we can gather. Let's keep the data as long as we want to keep it. But the more data you gather and the longer you keep it, the greater the security risk that you foist upon those people.
What? Why? Why do you think we have this cavalier attitude to data, to other people's privacy? What's going on there? What's wrong with our thinking?
Well, a couple of things. One is it's very easy to gather and store data today. The technology makes it incredibly easy to get more data and to store data. It's cheap and easy, and the amount of data that we can gather and the amount of data generated today is much greater than ever before. I think some estimates say in like in the span of a year, even a month, we create more data and have more data than in all of human history. It's I don't know the precise stat, but it's staggering how much data we have today versus 10, 20, 30 years ago. Also, the reason why they don't fully internalize their costs and do this is because the law doesn't hold them accountable. They're not held to account. So they can do this and they can kind of get away with it because the law turns away and doesn't force them to internalize those costs. So, why do it if they're not made to do it?
Ah, okay. So I want to get on the whole topic of law in a minute. Before we go there, you wrote a paper in 2021 on privacy harms. You and Daniel Citron. In it, you list all the different kinds of privacy harms. I think it would be so useful for us to sort of walk through them so that we can all understand, all of us listening and me included, what are these harms and why they matter. I think if people are more aware of the harms, more conscious, then they'll maybe start to shift their thinking about privacy and its value. Okay, so I'm going to go through them. I have the whole list, and then if I can I'll just say it, and then you can explain what it is and help us understand it. So this is a typology of privacy harms. A, physical harms.
This is a type of harm the law understands. The law is very good at rectifying physical harms. So, in some cases, privacy can lead to physical harm. So, if someone reveals information about someone and they are attacked or it compromises their safety, or the law is good at recognizing that's a traditional type of occurrence that the law is actually pretty good at. Unfortunately, though, most privacy invasions don't involve physical harm.
Economic harms.
Economic harms involve things like fraud or identity theft, where you lose money. And the law also is good with economic harm. So if you can show, yes, I definitely suffered this fraud and I'm out, hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars, then courts will recognize that the law is good at saying that's a harm. And that happens with some privacy violations, but a lot of them, the harm is not economic and it's not physical. Or there could be economic harm, but it could happen many years into the future, and that could be beyond what's called the statute of limitations. The law has a narrow span of time after an injury or after something goes wrong, like there's a breach. You only have like a few years to bring a lawsuit,
Right.
but you could be harmed 10 years from now. Your information could appear on the dark web and it could be used for identity theft, and by then it's too late.
Reputational harms.
This also is one that the law is pretty good at. Reputational harm is when your reputation is damaged. Discreditable information about someone is revealed, and it results in their struggling to get a job, or their reputation in their community is damaged. This happens sometimes with privacy violations, but a lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times the information that's revealed about someone doesn't harm their reputation, but it's still information that they don't want disclosed or used in certain ways.
Yeah. Psychological harms.
So these are harms that involve emotional distress. These are instances where there's a privacy violation, and someone has anxiety over it. They are concerned. They don't feel at ease. Their data was accessed, and someone out there has it, and they don't know what's going to be done with it, and that is unsettling. And the law is kind of mixed about this. Sometimes courts are recognize emotional distress as a harm, but other times courts won't, and they say, well, that just doesn't count. We don't think that that's a sufficient enough harm in and of itself. Uh, and they'll insist on showing physical or economic harm, but will not recognize that the kind of anxiety and distress caused by a data breach or a privacy violation is enough. And this is weird because I see that the law is very inconsistent on this regard. And what's frustrating is when I read cases where some courts will make a statement saying, like, courts don't recognize emotional distress harm. And then I can say, well, I know like thousands of other cases where they do. Like, why are you saying like an incorrect statement of the law? Like, as a law professor, I just want to give the judge, like, write an F on the opinion and say, here's back, rewrite it and resubmit. At least get your facts right. At least get the law right. Don't just ignore, you know, thousands of cases. But that's what we're seeing a lot of times with the opinions, is that, you know, just a radically inconsistent approach to recognizing psychological harm.
Autonomy harms.
These are one of the most complex things that the law must address, and courts really struggle with this. These are harms that are, there's a whole bunch of different types of them, and I won't get into all the different types because there's too many,
Mm-hmm.
but these are harms that are thwarting people's ability to make choices, or to have uses of their data uh, under control, uses of their data that impinge upon their autonomy. And this can be anything from, trying, manipulation of people into sharing more data than they want, or upending people's expectations on how data might be used, or making a promise about what data is being collected, used, or how long it's being retained, and then violating that promise, or saying, okay, you can opt out of mail, and then they send it anyway. So these are all autonomy harms. They are, infringing on people's ability to make choices about their own data and their lives, and manage what data is being collected and used about them. And courts really are struggling with seeing that as a harm. They often see that as trivial or not important. So company makes a promise that, okay, we won't, share your data with other companies, and then you find out they are doing that. They are sharing their data, and they completely violated their promise. And so we have a clear violation, a clear lie. And courts will say, "Oh, well, show me that you're harmed. Have you been harmed by the other company getting the data? What's wrong with the? Where's the harm?" So then they throw out the case.
Wow.
But this means that the companies that did this, they learn a lesson, right? Like, we can do this with
Yeah.
impunity.
There
We
no
can
yeah,
we can
exactly. There no
person. We're not
this
going to
is
help
why we're
you again.
having a problem, because the law is not seeing that the infringement or violation of our privacy is actually a harm. That's right at the crux of it. Well, I think we can all relate. You have your mobile phone, and you're going somewhere, and you're a smart person, so you don't have location on all the time, but you need to get from here to there, and you turn on location, and then you realize that you switch it off again, but they've still been tracking you the whole time. I mean, these companies are like, "Oh, we're not tracking you, but we are tracking you. I'm sending you. They're going to send you very specific um, marketing related to the location of your device," and we know that. Or even on a device that we're not moving with, on our laptop. Let's say it stays in our office or stays in our home. You have it flipping on, go to a private network, you do as much as you can to prevent intrusion, but they're like, yeah, sure, just turn that off, turn that off, turn that off, put this on private, and it doesn't make any difference. They're lying. They're all lying.
Well,
Let's say
well,
they're all lying.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think that there, some are, and some aren't. A lot of times, it can be, some won't even have some apps don't even have a privacy policy, so they don't even make any promises. Others make promises, and then they do break them. So some are lying. Some inadvertently, what'll happen is, they'll have the promises will be very narrow. Uh, and then people aren't expecting it. It's really our system where, oh, okay, we just disclose all this in a privacy notice, and then people are somehow expected to read and understand these notices. Well, people don't read. No one reads the privacy notice. No one. No one really knows what's going on. So that really doesn't help much either. And then to put the onus on people to constantly have to switch things on and off and toggle this and toggle that and do this and do that becomes really hard. It's really hard for people to remember all the time. Oh yeah, I need to do this and I need to do that and I need to. It's asking too much of people to do. And then when they forget to do it or something goes wrong, they're blamed for it. Oh, well, you didn't read the notice, or you didn't flip this on and off, or you didn't do whatever. Uh, that becomes the problem. And then there's also the default setting problem where, so well, okay, we'll just set this by default that we can track you, that we can use your data, that we can gather the data. And if you don't want to, you have to read this notice, and then you have to, check this and that and whatever to kind of opt out of it. Well, we know most people don't look at that, so most people aren't opting out. And then the company says, "Hey, you consented to it because we gave you a chance to opt out and you didn't do it. It's the consumer's fault. You really don't care about privacy because you didn't do it." The problem there is that doesn't scale. I mean, it's impossible to do that with thousands of websites and apps and all the different things that we use and all the different instances of data collection. So how they set the defaults and the reliance on opt out is a problem. But even opt in is a problem. It's a problem too when somebody, okay, here's our terms of service, here's this, and you have to read all this stuff and then click accept. And so here's 50 screens that you have to read and an accept button. No one's going to read the 50 screens. They're just going to click accept and move on. And that's why I think there's a big problem with consent in privacy, or people being asked to consent to things that they really can't fully consent to, because it's too complicated. It's too complicated to really know how they're going to use the data and what they're going to do with it. The notices are not really even readable and understandable by most people. If you make them too simple, uh, then they don't say anything meaningful. To really manage the privacy, you've got to know a lot of things. And one thing I like in this too is, when you walk into the supermarket and you buy milk, you can rest assured that it's going to be okay, right? It's not going to kill you. And it used to be the case that milk was laced with formaldehyde, and it would kill babies, and babies would die in mass from this tainted milk. And people, you'd have to worry, like, is the milk I'm going to buy, is that going to kill me or not, or kill my baby or not?
Yeah.
Today, you don't have to worry about that, and uh, you don't have to go and research the farm where the milk came from, or you don't have to become an expert on milk. You can just buy it and say, look, I just want to look at price and brand and the taste, and that's all I care about.
Mhm.
Um, with privacy, on the other hand, it's back to that old world where it could be laced with formaldehyde and it could kill you, and it's up to the consumer to figure all this out. But the consumer can't figure all this out. They're not going to become an expert data scientist and understand all the inferences that algorithms can make about people. In fact, even the people designing the algorithms don't even know all the inferences that could be made. And to understand it, I'd need to say, okay, how do I understand what a company's doing with my data? I want to sit down with their privacy officer and have a long conversation about how the data is used. I want to see their training. Are they training their employees well? I want to understand, what are their vendor agreements like when they share data? What are they requiring their vendors to do with that data? I want to know about their data security, but just telling me they have good security doesn't help me. I need to know specifics, like, are they encrypting their data, and what kind of encryption are they using, and do they have good technical security measures, and do they train employees, and what steps do they have to prevent all these other problems? Do they do penetration testing? uh, all sorts of things that the average consumer won't be able to know or wouldn't ask. And even if we gave them all this information, they wouldn't understand what, that they shouldn't have to become security experts and privacy experts and data scientist experts and AI experts to just make these decisions. Thrusting them on the consumer, it's just, it's back to the milk
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
Just,
I
I
mean,
don't think it's a reasonable solution.
it's I love this milk analogy. So think of it, right? We have no laws. regarding food and quality of food and standards of food. So every time I go to the store, I have to go with a tester and I have to poke the food. Is this food good? Is it corrupted? Is it rotten? Is it degraded? Is it old? That would be insane. So similarly, we've created this whole new internet, this cyberspace, all of this data, all of this new possibilities, and we have no structure, no laws, no standards for privacy. Why? And what can we why don't we have? I know I'm in California. We have these, all these data laws. It doesn't make any difference. If I go on the site, they say, "Oh, you're in California. That means you can opt out of this or something." I'm like, "Yeah, what?" You do it, you do it. They make it as hard as possible, and then ultimately, nothing really changes. So even with the California laws, nothing really changes. Why are we 20 something years later? Because the internet started in 1991. By 2000, it was clear what was going to happen. You wrote the book in 2004, re entering 2024. Nothing's changed. 2 decades. Why? Why can't we get a comprehensive federal privacy law in place?
Well, there's the two problems. One is the comprehensive federal privacy law, and there's a lot of political reasons why that's going to be very tough, and I can get into that a little later. And then why is privacy law not effective? Like, why is this law in California not doing the job? And I think that's because privacy laws took a wrong turn, and it's taken a wrong turn long ago. It's privacy laws used to start getting passed around the world. It's about 50 years ago, 50 or even more years ago. But laws, we actually had a lot of federal laws that were passed in the late 20th century, from 1970 to 2000, before Congress became dysfunctional. And they were sectoral laws. They applied here, and they were inconsistent with each other, but they would apply to different economic sectors. And that works well when the economic sectors are static and they never change, but they do change. I mean, business moves and the economy evolves, and companies that do one thing start doing something else in different industries. Tech companies say, "Hey, we want to go into health." So the sectoral approach, becomes, it doesn't work very well. But we have these federal laws, but they generally take this approach that U.S. law has generally taken, which is a fairly free market approach and a fairly self-regulatory approach, which is this. And I'm simplifying, but generally it's like this: company discloses what it's going to do in a privacy notice, and then it's just held to what it promised. And the idea is, the companies can do what they want, uh, as long as they've told people about it and they get some kind of consent. And the U.S. works with a opt-out consent for a lot of laws. Some laws have opt-in, but a lot of laws have opt-out, which is, hey, if I don't do anything, I'm deemed to have consented. So an action, doing nothing means that you've consented, which I think is completely
Yeah.
bogus, because it's very clear. Doing nothing doesn't mean I'm consenting to something. It means I didn't do anything. Um, in the EU, the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, takes a different view of consent. It's a opt-in approach. You have to affirmatively say yes. But there's also a problem in that it's still working on consent, and so you go there and you get these things like, "Do you want our cookies? Click accept." And I always click accept, because if I don't click accept, then I have to go to a page and learn about like all these different cookies, more than the Girl Scouts offer. And I don't want to learn about all these cookies. I don't want to toggle like 1,000 different things. Just really what I want it to do is go away. So I click accept. So now it looks like I've consented, or I didn't consent. I actually am really saying, like, please go away. I don't want to learn about cookies. I don't want to deal with this. Um, so I think that's really what the problem is that privacy law kind of sees that the consumer is helpless and powerless, and the instinct is, let's try to empower them, let's give them control. And the problem is that people can't really exercise control here. I mean, I might feel powerless when I'm on the plane. I'm flying on. I can't fly the plane. I have no control over what happens to me when I'm on a plane. The answer isn't to just stick me in the cockpit and make me fly the thing. The answer is make sure that there's safety and make sure that things are looked after so that someone who knows something is focused on it is keeping me secure and that I can rest safely in my seat and not have to worry about flying the plane. But privacy, the law made this choice. We'll just try to stick people in the cockpit. But that's the mistake.
So why can't we get the law to respect the value of privacy? It's like privacy is a human right. You can't do that.
Well, I think that the problem is that it's a political will issue in the U.S.
Why?
There are different
Why? I
flaws.
mean, we know that the Congress is completely dysfunctional, blah blah blah. But why? Why? Because I can see this shouldn't be something that's partisan because everybody can agree to this. So why are they not agreeing to it? Is there some other agenda going on that the government wants to have the right to invade our lives? So they don't want to put laws in place that would then sort of prevent them from doing what they want to do.
Yeah.
Is that what's going on? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Well, the government typically exempts itself from a lot of the laws.
That's
So,
true.
a lot of the privacy laws exempt the government
That's true.
already and
Yeah.
give the government favorable treatment.
Yeah.
Um, but generally, I think I think it's partly a failure of imagination. It's partly that laws have gotten fixated over rights, and once one does it, it kind of becomes like a meme or it just spreads unthinkingly. And so California in 2018, due to the fact that the federal government is just not able to pass a law, and we can get into that why, but states started to pass laws, and it started with California, and they created a law called the California Consumer Privacy Act (CCPA), and this law is an opt-out law. You can get information about yourself, and then you can click a button to opt out of sharing of that data. And that it relied on a lot, giving people a lot of rights in their data. And then a lot of states have basically done a copy and paste of the California law, and some have made alterations, but generally it's the same concept, the same structure, the same thing. A lot of them are a little weaker. Every now and then there's a stronger provision here or there, but it's there's not that much imagination. When you look at them all, you wouldn't say, "Wow, look at this amazing array of interesting solutions to things." It's like the same old stuff spat out again. Repeat, 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 copy and paste. And I think I see that a lot with privacy laws. It's a shame because for California, this was driven by a referendum, and it was actually amended by a referendum. I wish, I think any referendum would have passed. I wish that when that referendum were the creator of that was not you know an expert on privacy. He was someone who came to it, and I wish that more consultation of experts was done, and folks have looked at how has privacy law worked for the last 50 years, to see what works and what doesn't, and I think then come up with a law that could work a lot better. And I think there's not. I mean, uh, I've been saying things, and a lot of other scholars and commentators have said things on privacy law and what works and what doesn't. And a lot of what's been said has been ignored. The policymakers somehow think they know what they're doing. They don't really look at what's been written, and then they create the laws. And then when one law gets passed, they all start to copy that law, regardless of whether the law actually works or not. And then it feeds into the privacy paradox. So then the story becomes, okay, we gave you rights to obtain all the information these companies have, and you can access your records, and you can delete information, you can do all this stuff. And look at the stats. No one does it. So people don't care about privacy anymore. See, if they really cared, they use these rights. But the problem is the rights don't work. So the approach is flawed. But then it's like, okay, blame the consumer. See, we gave you rights.
Yeah.
And businesses are kind of like, hey, this isn't so bad for us. Yeah, it costs us to comply with the law, and we have to do this stuff. But generally, we can keep on using the data as we want. A few people may exercise their rights, opt out of certain things, but we know that the vast majority aren't going to do anything, and so we can keep on trucking,
Wow.
and so they love it. So it's still a win for them.
Mm.
And politicians pat themselves on the back, like, look at all these great things that we did. We gave people all these rights, and they don't want it. And then, but we're going to see that poll after poll says people are concerned about their privacy, and they don't think it's adequately protected. And this is the problem, is that the policymakers just keep going down the wrong path, and they think that's not going to change the polls. I don't think we're going to see, in a few years, people saying, "Okay,
Yeah.
we're not worried about privacy
Anymore. Yeah.
anymore. Problem solved because these laws have done the trick."
I can.
No,
I.
the laws don't.
I can just. We can just imagine if we have this, massive problem that's not being addressed. It's a problem at scale. It's not an individual problem. It's a national problem. It's a global problem. That it's going to lead to some huge, horrendous, like cataclysmic outcome, like for sure. But before we get into that, because I think I want you to tell us about, you were prescient back in 2004. You predicted everything. You said this is what's going to happen. Um, so I want you to talk about in a little bit, next 20 years. But before we get there, right now we've seen the rise of this new version of AI, the large language models and chatbots and chat GPTs and whatever's. Um, how do you see this new form of AI impacting privacy, just from your perspective?
Well, it's going to have many impacts. It's a culmination of certain things that are already happening in privacy.
Mm.
So, part of me is excited because there are new things. Because anytime you take something and you strengthen it and accelerate it, it does create new issues. But these issues were around
Mm-hmm.
for I wrote about them, and it's really it's basically the technologies work through the aggregation and analysis of data,
Yes.
in essence. And the AI can be used for so many different purposes. It's going to have so many different effects. And now these algorithms, machine learning and deep learning algorithms, are becoming widely used by everybody, and it's going to and it's going to accelerate.
Yeah.
Um, and it can be used just like any technology for good and for bad. There's many good uses, but there's also many bad uses, and a bunch of privacy issues that can be involved are, one, to work, the algorithms need a lot of data. So AI needs just a ridiculous amount of data, because the more data you use, that's what makes the algorithms uh, work
Yeah.
better, and why they're today they work, whereas they didn't work quite as well before. We have so much more data, and computing
Yeah.
power on the data is much greater.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the uh, That's just a collection of data, and gathering of data, because I think for most people, did you ever say, "Hey, yeah, please collect my data for use in AI"? People ever even been asked? No, but they're doing it. They've collected data. One company called Clearview AI has scooped up people's photos, billions of photos on the internet, to use in a facial recognition tool that they sell to law enforcement agencies around the world. Did you know that you're essentially part of a virtual lineup constantly? Your photo is used in their system, because they just grab the photos from LinkedIn and from anywhere they could find on the internet, using this art. Well, people don't care. It's out in the public, therefore it's not secret. Don't have anything to hide, no privacy. And now it's used in their AI. And that's just one example. So there's the collection of data that's a problem. Then there's the use of the data. How is the data being used about people? It can be used about people in many different ways. It can be used to make decisions about people, make inferences about them. So you gather people's data, and then the algorithms can make inferences about other information about me that I don't want to share. That's the example I told you about the Target case where they inferred, that people were pregnant. Now they can do this with a whole host of different things. So that's just that instance on steroids. Then there's making predictions about people, decisions that, okay, using AI for hiring decisions. So they will have AI analyze resumes and pick out which resumes for people to hire. And there are a lot of problems with how they do that. There's a lot of bias that enters into this system when they start doing these kind of things. Or they'll use the algorithms. Now there's an algorithm used to sentence people, an algorithm called Compass, which attempts to predict whether people will commit crimes again in the future. And then this is used to determine their sentence. And if the algorithm says that someone's likely to commit a crime in the future, the sentence could be higher. This is making a prediction based on data, and it's very problematic because uh, there's all sorts of bias in data itself. And then there's a tendency for people to think that the algorithms are somehow neutral and bias free when they're not. Then there are quantification problems that when you not everything can be reduced to quantifiable information that these algorithms can use. Uh, there's a lot of idiosyncratic cases and things that involve human judgment
Yeah,
that these machines can't do. So sometimes it's like trying to translate an apple into an orange. And I don't think you can always do that. But I think, a little bit too much exuberance and faith in what these algorithms can and can't do and in how neutral they are. I mean, AI is a little bit like the Wizard of Oz, where there's a guy in the machine. There are people
yeah,
all throughout AI that are making choices. It's not just some computer doing it all. This is not about like a sentient
I
computer
know.
thinking. That this is about a people who design a model,
Exactly.
uh, and they design an algorithm, and then they're sticking in human data created by humans
Exactly.
that the algorithm is then culling, but they're humans all throughout
The
the
process.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, really funny how this whole idea of how we anthropomorphize these AI models and think that they're like something's happening and it's going to get consciousness one day and then it's going to do this is such a joke. Come on, guys, wake up. If the things you want to see happen, what's the positive outcome for us in privacy over the next 10, 20 years? And then if they don't, we keep on the path that we are, what's the negative possibility for the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, on the positive side, I think I don't want to be too much of a pessimist, but I don't think you can solve privacy. I think that privacy is always something you can manage. So, people say privacy's dead. Well, I'm not that pessimist. Privacy's not dead. People have always said privacy's dead, but privacy is under threat. Some people say privacy's dying, and they constantly say privacy's dying because, yeah, there's always a threat to privacy. Technology will keep evolving, the problems will keep emerging. We must keep managing it. We must be vigilant. There's no resting point. We're going to have to constantly solve for it. So we're never going to feel at ease, like problem solved, we got it. Take a deep breath and relax. It's always going to be something we're going to have to manage. So that's number one. But that's the best I think we can do is we can at least get better at what we're doing here and managing this better and controlling it better and making things safer for individuals. And that's I think the best we can do.
Mm-hmm.
What's likely to happen? What if we don't do that in 20 years? Is that the technologies can be used for some really problematic things. Um, I think the idea that the machines are going to sort of get consciousness and kill us all, I don't think is likely. But what I think will happen most likely is that we're not going to um, the machines aren't going to take over by their own accord.
Yeah.
We are going to give them the power. we're going to gradually turn over and cede more decisions to the machines. So they're not going to be wanting to take over
No.
it. We're going to hand it to them on a silver platter and say, machines, you decide. And they're not going to decide in ways that are are necessarily better. But the way that technology hides, it's gotten very good at hiding the negative effects and the downside on a really shiny happy face. So unlike Big Brother, where in Orwell's dystopia 1984, where the world is drab and gray and ugly, and you see the effects of surveillance everywhere, you know, I think in our world we won't see it. It will fade into the background. We won't notice, and we already don't notice how much of our lives already is impacted by AI. How many decisions are already occurring through algorithms? How much data is already being collected about us? It's trying to make it as inconspicuous as possible so that people don't feel that oppressive Big Brother ishness that they want to rebel against.
Hmm.
Instead, people will feel like, wow, the world is beautiful, and it looks like it's algorithm free, and decisions are just made, and it seems, it's a utopia, but peer behind the curtain, and you have all sorts of technology being used about people in problematic ways. And the idea that somehow the technology is going to do this autonomously is wrong. There are people behind this. There's always people behind this, and they're using the technology in certain ways to get certain results that they want.
Exactly.
So the technology is increasing the power of individuals and companies and governments over individuals, and over other individuals, and that's what's going on. But they want to hide that and make it look like, oh, it's just technology working neutrally and seamlessly and beautifully. But that's not what is going on. So it just will further this thing, but will it's kind of like a boil the frog problem, right? We'll feel okay. The water will keep getting hotter and hotter and hotter until it there's just more total control over people, and more unaccountable power being used in problematic ways, and then the hide it from people so that they don't experience it that way. And this is the problem with the Target case. There's an epilogue to the case, which is that after the story broke in the New York Times, and there was a big outcry, like, "Oh, how creepy! Look what they're doing. This is terrible. That they're trying to infer whether people are pregnant or not." The executives apparently learned the following lesson. They said, in the future, what we're going to do is that we'll send ads about non-baby products too. We will try to make it look like we're not totally, we haven't totally figured out that. So we'll send the baby stuff, but we'll send other stuff too to make it look like the algorithm isn't as accurate. And that will then make people feel more comfortable and won't creep them out. And I think like that's totally the wrong lesson, right? It's basically like hide it, make it less conspicuous, but still do it.
That's
And so
unbelievable.
that's a problematic lesson. And the only way that I think we can fight back is we have to start really holding them accountable for the use of this. We have to address the power at play. And if we don't, um, it's like a boil the frog. We might not even notice what's going on. It won't feel like the world of Big Brother.
Well, we're
It
halfway
will,
we're halfway there right now. We're halfway cooked, and we haven't
yeah,
yet.
and it can continue that way, and you just we won't know it.
Yeah.
And that's what's really scary is that the technology is very good at it's able to gather data and use data in very inconspicuous ways, in ways that just don't really hit people. People don't realize it because it's kind of all behind the scenes. I mean, the ads that you see online are chosen, and all the tracking and all the data collection occurs. So much occurs and people aren't even aware of it, so they don't feel like they're being watched because it's all hidden.
Yeah. And again, we have to remind them that it's not the technology is not just doing this. There are people behind the technology using the technology to do this. I want you to give people one thing that they can do. I know we're not going to make them think, oh, you can do this and it's going to change everything, blah, blah, blah. But what's one thing that they can do after they hear you and listen to this and understand the importance of privacy? What would you like to see them do or think or be differently?
Yeah, well, the traditional thing that I often see in these when I'm asked questions like give people a tip, and oh, just safeguard your social security number, or don't sign up for these websites, or don't have a social media account, or go and delete this or that. I don't think those are going to work, because ultimately, for the reasons I said, I think putting it just puts the onus on the consumer and makes them think, okay, if I just do this, that somehow I can protect myself. I think the main thing is to demand accountability. That we need to demand that there's greater accountability, and not settle for the existing laws and the existing solutions to say, these these laws aren't enough, and these privacy rights that I'm being given to access my data and to delete data or correct data or opt out are just not good enough. And it doesn't mean that they're bad things, but they're just not enough. I asked for a meal and you gave me a crumb. You need to give me more, and there has to be a lot greater greater accountability by both by everyone, by the companies that are gathering and using people's data, as well as by the government and what they're doing.
So, how can people demand accountability? How would they go about doing this?
Well, I think it's to really push legislators to think about privacy differently. I mean, people are trying to voice that when when polls are taken. Um, uh, but it's also not to fall into some of these old arguments like I've got nothing to hide. It's really to demand that there be greater accountability, to say that these solutions are not effective, and they're not helping. I think part of it also is that some of the polls that we see are somewhat superficial. It'd be nice if the polls were to really suss out more than just a generalized concern over privacy, but would really kind of help show that people get people to start thinking about things that could help them here, so that it's a better picture can be painted about what people would want, because I think when people are informed, I think what they want is they want to feel safe. They want to know that when they're surfing the internet, when they're sharing their data, they're not going to be harmed. Just don't harm me, don't hurt me. Do what's in my best interest with my information. Be trustworthy, and I think that's what people want.
Yeah,
That when I use a technology, I want to know that it's not going to hurt me.
right.
I drive a car. I want to know it's not going to blow up on me. I fly a plane. I know that it's safe. And I think that's So I think it's the people. The best thing is to help kind of get the policymakers to know
Yeah,
that they need to do more. That they can't just stop at a law like California's, or pass the same old law again and again and again. That we really need to demand greater accountability from the companies, and that's really push the policymakers to do it.
yeah,
And I think if the people do that, I think that could start to change things, and it can happen in one state. I mean, California's been the most influential. They initiated the law. And I think it's great that the states are passing the laws, even though I think that the laws are weak and I wish they were different. I think it's at least a good thing that they're doing something, at least better than the federal government that's not. Um, I think they need to change what they do, but it could be one state comes out with a law that comes out with an interesting innovation, and it doesn't have to be the whole thing and everything. It could just be one thing that advances the ball.
Yeah.
And if that advances the ball and it's a good idea, hopefully other states will start to copy that. And that's what we see in privacy law. It's a lot of
Yeah.
copycats. And
So we just need
once
one good set of laws or law from one state, and that could get the ball rolling in the right direction.
I'll even settle for one good idea. Like one good part of a law, that does something good. The more of those that spreads, to other laws. Even if the whole law isn't good, there's some good parts or good pieces, and I'll take advancement wherever I can find it,
Any,
even in little parts.
Folks, you'll find links to Daniel's website, books, and newsletter, and socials in the description below. So sign up for the newsletter. I think that's a great way. It's a great actual action step for understanding privacy, the value and importance of it, and keeping up with Daniel's groundbreaking and absolutely vital work. As we move into the future, I think, Daniel, your work is going to be so increasingly essential for all of us as humans. And Daniel Solove, this was so enlightening for me. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Make sure to listen, follow, and subscribe for new episodes wherever you get your podcasts and on our YouTube channel.